Agree.
Anyway, and this is the Transition Network, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with our organization. You are. Okay, good. So everybody, I'd like to give an introduction to Amanda, and then we're going to let Amanda get started. And once Amanda has finished, we're going to open it up for questions and answers. So I'm going to ask that any questions that you have, just write them in the chat. And after the presentation, we'll take the questions from the chat. All right? Great. Okay. So Amanda is the Deputy Director of Public Affairs at the New York City Campaign Finance Board, and she's been there since 2014. She manages the agency's voter education and engagement initiatives through New York City Votes, which informs 5 million New York City voters about their elections. Prior to that, she worked on voting rights and elections, the Voting Rights and Elections Project in the Democracy Program at the Brennan Center for Justice. She holds a master's in political science from Columbia University. So Amanda, I'd like to welcome you.
Thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be here this evening. I am going to screen share and show my presentation. I know everyone has a lot of questions. I promise my presentation covers a lot of ground. So first, I'm going to talk about, our upcoming elections and why they're so important. I'll get into ranked choice voting and sort of how it got to New York City. What is it? Where is it used? I'm going to explain the counting process maybe a couple times. I usually walk through the counting process. Some people start asking questions about counting before I've gotten to that part of the presentation. Trust me, I will get there. We will go over all of your questions in depth. And then I'm going to talk about other resources that we have in case you want to share anything with family, with friends, with your neighbors. I see that people have been getting the voter guide, which is great. I think this is one of our best resources. So I'll talk about everything that we have going on. So just bear with me for a moment. It always takes me a second to actually share my PowerPoint and then get it up and going. In terms
Amanda, I do want to clarify something. We're not going to take questions until the end of your presentation. All right, so people can write them in chat, but we won't take them until the end.
I'm just letting you know, if you have a question, odds are I will get to it during the presentation, but I usually go over things a couple times, especially counting. I'll talk about it in depth during the slides, and I will answer questions about it at the end, because I think this is the part that trips people up. So we try to make it a little bit more intuitive for everyone. But without further ado, I'm just going to dive in. So as you know, I'm here from NYC Votes. NYC Votes is the voter engagement initiative of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. So what the Campaign Finance Board is best known for is running the public matching funds program for people who are running for city office. They can get small contributions matched on an 8-to-1 basis to help fund their campaigns. But another really significant part of what our agency does is voter education and engagement. That is part of our charter mandate, particularly to reach out to underrepresented populations and try to increase their participation. In addition to that, when ranked choice voting was added to the city charter, there was a part added in it requiring the Campaign Finance Board to conduct a public education campaign. So that's what you're seeing with the voter guide in your mailbox, with the ad campaign you might be seeing out in the wild, and with presentations like the one I'm giving you right now. So all of you know this, but early voting for the 2021 primary election is actually kicking off this Saturday. Early voting will run through this Saturday through June 20th, and election day itself is on June 22nd. We always like to give people that reminder. And just a reminder of what offices you're going to see on the ballot. The big ones that I'll be covering today are those city offices. So those are mayor, comptroller, and public advocate at the city level. All of the borough president seats are up for re-election, and all 51 city council seats are up for re-election. You may see other offices on your ballot, especially if you're in Manhattan. You're going to see district attorney candidates. There may be other positions such as district leader, judges, and judicial convention delegates. I'll talk a little bit about how that's going to impact the ballot later on in the presentation. So again, one of the things we're talking to people about is just how important this election is. This is the biggest citywide election that has happened in 20 years. You know, we have more candidates running for office than we have ever had before. 2/3 of city council is opening up. We have a chance to elect a new mayor, a new comptroller. And there are so many issues that are so critical in this day and age, and those local offices really impact those issues. The big ones that we keep hearing about from voters are really obviously healthcare and COVID-19 relief, particularly economic relief as our city gets restarted after the pandemic. We hear a lot from people about police and criminal justice reform, as well as racial justice. We hear a lot about affordable education, affordable housing and education. These are all issues that these local offices have a huge impact on, and they have such a huge impact on our day-to-day lives. So one thing we're telling everyone is it is so important to get out to vote. That is the why. Ranked choice voting is the how. Once you're like hooked on voting, we can talk you through how to actually fill out your ballot. So before I dive into the presentation where I'm going to talk about all of this more in depth, I'm going to show a 2-minute ranked choice voting explainer video that we made that we think really gives the best like bite-sized overview of how ranked choice voting is going to work. This video gets a little bit into why we're using it, how to correctly mark your ballot and how to cast that ballot, how winners are decided, and voter education deadlines. After I've shown the video, I am then going to explain everything you see in the video in greater depth. So without further ado, I'm going to try this. It usually works. If it doesn't work, feel free to chime in and say the sound is terrible or something.
There is no sound.
All right, so that video probably explains it much better than I would anyway. Whoops, sorry about that. So as the video said, what is ranked choice voting? It's just a new way for voters to elect their representatives. Now we're all used to voting for just one person for any given office. Now you can rank up to 5 candidates in the order of your preference. You know, we tell people if you still want to vote for just one, you can vote for just one. If you only like 3 people and only want to rank 3, you can do that. Just gives voters more choices about how to use their vote and how to fill out their ballot. And what we find that this does is it gives voters more say in who wins at the end of the day. It encourages candidates to reach out to different communities and talk about issues that matter to those communities. And it can lead to more diverse candidates running and winning office. So I always say this, I'm very sorry to tell people New York City is actually not the first place that ranked choice voting is going to be used. It is in fact already used in 17 other cities across the United States, including San Francisco, Minneapolis, and Santa Fe. Maine actually uses ranked choice voting on a statewide level. Alaska just voted in 2020 to start using ranked choice voting on a state level as well. And we always like to tell people they actually use ranked choice voting to determine Academy Award winners. So this is a system that's been around. What's kind of exciting about it being here in New York City is we are the largest jurisdiction in the United States and the most diverse jurisdiction in the United States to use ranked choice voting, which presents a really interesting challenge that other cities have not faced. But we are coming out far ahead of where those other cities were this close to Election Day, which is great. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, but just as a reminder about how ranked choice voting got to New York City in the first place. Back in 2019, we had a charter revision commission, and they voted to create ballot question 1 that would establish ranked choice voting in primary and special elections for office and go into effect on January 1st, 2021. So 73.5% of New Yorkers voted yes for this, to establish ranked choice voting. I always say it's hard to get 73.5% of New Yorkers to agree about anything, but overwhelmingly New Yorkers wanted ranked choice voting among those who voted. And just so you can see what support looked like across the city, support was really strong across most of the city. So on the map in green, you can see all of Manhattan, all of the Bronx, most of Queens, except for this like southeast portion, and most of Brooklyn, except for a couple of the southern districts, were very much in support of ranked choice voting. The northern shore of Staten Island is that lighter green. They did vote yes. There were some districts, primarily in Staten Island, but again, a couple in the south of Brooklyn and Queens. Those are shown in that sort of orange color, that did oppose ranked choice voting. But we like to show this map because it just shows, like, you know, people in districts across New York City voted in favor of this. It was supported in virtually every community and every type of community in New York. Oh, sorry guys, this is not relevant for you. But as I said, ranked choice voting went into effect on January 1st, 2021. We are using it in special elections. So in special elections, those are ones where anyone can vote regardless of political party. Also in primary elections, you can only vote in those if you're registered to the party holding that election. So ranked choice voting is also used in those city offices that I mentioned: mayor, public advocate, comptroller, borough president, and city council. We like to go over this as well. We are not using ranked choice voting in general elections. We are not using ranked choice voting in federal or state elections. So those are for things like president or governor or Congress. And we're also not using ranked choice voting in local races, like for district attorney or judgeship. So if you're in Manhattan and you do have district attorney candidates on your ballot, ranked choice voting races actually have to be on one side of the ballot, and what we call single choice elections are on the other side of the ballot. So make sure to always flip your ballot over and make sure there's like nothing on the back that you're missing, because the district attorney race will be on a different side. So let's go over the steps that you as a voter need to know for marking your ballot. First off, you want to pick your first choice candidate, and just like you would fill out a normal ballot, you want to completely fill in the oval next to that candidate's name in the first column. If you have a second choice candidate, you want to find that column with the number 2 on top and fill in the oval next to your second choice candidate's name in that second column. And you can continue to do this for up to 5 candidates. You know, just sort of going through, it's sort of like a Scantron test. You know, you find column 3, who's your third choice candidate, column 4. And it's not drastically different from how you fill out a ballot now. Again, you can vote for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. We always recommend to people to vote for all 5 if you can, because it makes sure that your vote and your ballot goes as far as possible. And I'll explain that in just a moment. So there are a couple errors that we tell people about that you can make when you're filling out your ballot. We don't do this to scare people. People actually make ballot marking errors all the time in every single election. This is just how it looks in a ranked choice voting election. So there's something in normal elections that's very common, and it's known as overvoting. And this is when voters go and accidentally mark a candidate, like more than one candidate for any given office. The way to overvote in a ranked choice voting race is if you accidentally rank 2 candidates with the same ranking. So in this graphic that we have here, the voter marked both candidate B and candidate C as their first choice vote. So what that means is when the Board of Elections goes to count that vote, they don't know what the voter's intent was. They don't know who your first choice was. So this is the type of error that will invalidate your ballot. And we want to make sure that people are ranking everyone, like candidates, only one candidate per ranking, essentially. There's another error called duplicate ranking. This will not invalidate your ballot, but it's just not a good idea because it doesn't actually help your candidate. Duplicate ranking is when people will rank a given candidate. In this example, this voter marked candidate B as their first, second, third, and fourth and fifth choice, which is great. Clearly, this person really likes candidate B, but if you know how ranked choice voting ballots are counted, this doesn't actually help candidate B once candidate B gets eliminated from the race. So we really tell people, if you're going to rank people, make sure you're actually using your rankings. Don't just try to load it all for one candidate because it doesn't affect the outcome. All right, so how do ballots get counted? This is the part that people really get hung up on the most. So that's why I like to go over it a couple times. And again, I will go over it in Q&A. We actually think that explains it so well that we play it twice. But I'm just going to break it down step by step. In the counting process, what happens is, first of all, on election night, the Board of Elections will share unofficial results, who got the most first choice votes. They have to wait for all the absentee ballots to come in, and then they figure out, okay, how many first choice votes did every candidate get? If a candidate gets more than 50% of those first choice votes, great. They got a majority of votes and they've won the election. There's no need to start to go to counting in rounds. But if no candidate wins more than 50% of first choice votes, that's when we move into the ranked choice voting counting system where it happens in rounds. Many of you were talking earlier about how many candidates you have, like you have 8 candidates in your city council race. As you can imagine, when there are more candidates on the ballot, it makes it less likely that someone's going to get to 50% on that first round. So you might be seeing this a lot in your council races, in the mayor's race, things like that. So let's say we're in a situation where we move to counting in rounds. Here we have a graphic with 4 candidates, candidate A, B, C, and D. Here, let's say the Board of Elections goes to count ballots. They find out that candidate D is the lowest vote getter with only 12% of the vote. Once it's determined candidate D is the lowest vote getter, candidate D loses. Candidate D gets eliminated from the race. But let's say I, as a voter, had chosen candidate D, then my vote moves to my second choice candidate. So if I really liked candidate C, my vote would move to candidate C. If I really liked candidate A and chose that person as my second choice, my vote would be moved to candidate A's column. So I like to describe this in one of two ways. One way you could think about it is like, let's say ballots were being counted by hand. In Ireland, they do actually do this by hand. We will not be doing that in New York City. But let's say you're dividing ballots by pile for each candidate, and then one candidate with the shortest pile gets eliminated. Then imagine sorting those ballots and physically picking them up and moving them into the pile for other candidates. So you can sort of see how they move through the process. Another way of thinking about it, because I am a list maker and I tend to like be a linear thinker more than a visual one, is imagine that you are, writing your top 5 candidates in a list, 1 through 5. When your favorite candidate gets knocked out of the race, cross that person out and your vote goes to the next highest person in your list. So it goes to your second choice person if that person's in the race. It goes to your third choice person if your second choice has been eliminated. And I'll dive into what that looks like a little bit more. So what happens in this example is now candidate C is again the lowest vote getter. So everyone who had voted for candidate C, their votes moved to their next highest ranked candidate. So if I had voted for candidate D first and then candidate C second and then candidate C got eliminated, let's say I voted for candidate B, my vote then gets moved to candidate B's pile of votes. If I voted for candidate C first, then my vote was with candidate C in that first round, but once candidate C gets eliminated, let's say I voted for candidate A as my second choice, my vote would be moved to candidate A's column. So this is how it sort of works in rounds. We simplify it because I think people get hung up with how many rounds are there going to be. It just sort of keeps like going in the system until we get to 2 candidates at the end of the race. That's not how it works everywhere, but in New York City, we go to the final 2 and whoever gets the most votes at the end wins the race. So in this example, candidate B has over 50%, but also has clearly more votes than candidate A. So candidate B is the winner. So now that you've taken a minute to like think about how the actual ranking works, let's talk about some reasons you might want to rank candidates. I think the number one reason, I know I feel this as a voter, quite frankly, is that you can have more say in who gets elected. So even if your top choice doesn't win, you can still influence the ultimate outcome because your vote moves to your second choice, to your third choice, your fourth, or your fifth. But that only happens if your top choice is eliminated. I don't know if you've ever had this situation. I've been in this situation a lot, where I've had races that have multiple candidates running in the race. I think presidential primaries are like a really good example to use here because there will always be a lot of candidates running and maybe I have a favorite. And maybe then there are other candidates I'd be happy with, but not quite as happy as if my favorite won. But I always tend to like the people that might not be the most viable candidates or might not make it to all the way to the end. Maybe they're not the biggest fundraisers or not the best campaigners. So then I, as a voter, have to make some strategic choices about how do I use my vote if I can only vote for one person. Ranked choice voting sort of takes that calculation away because in a ranked choice voting system, I can just vote for my favorite candidate. I don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to win. And then I can sort of go from there and be like, okay, who else is it that I like, or I might want to rank, or I might like their policies or something like that. So then even if not as many people like my top choice candidate as I do, I can still say, okay, who comes in second? Who comes in third? And the reason this really matters is because in New York City, I think it's something like 2/3 of races are determined where winners only get like 30% of the vote or less. So if you think about it, that means that like most of a district or most of the city didn't actually vote to put that person in office. And in ranked choice voting, because you have more say over who is the ultimate winner, you get like just a much broader base of support at the end of the day. So another reason to rank, and this sort of touches on what I was just talking about, is that candidates end up appealing to more voters. They talk to different communities. And they really talk about and consider different issues than if they ran in a single choice system. Because then they have an incentive not just to get your first choice vote, but maybe to get your second choice or your third choice. You know, we're already seeing how this is affecting the race, especially for mayor with candidates going out into communities they might not have talked to before. But it's really happening in every race across the city. Because, you know, in a single choice system, when a candidate's campaigning, most campaigns have to come up with what they call a win number. They're like, all right, how many votes do I think I have to get to win office to beat my opponents? And then what are the voters that I think I can turn out to get me to that win number? You know, who's my base? Who's most likely to vote for me? And okay, once I've determined who that group of people is, I don't really need to talk to anyone else. Ranked choice voting totally changes that calculation. And now candidates actually need to talk to pretty much everyone because there's more incentive for them to become your second choice vote, even if they're not your first. So a lot of candidates are just like addressing issues they might not have done in previous elections. Finally, we also know from ranked choice voting in other cities that voters end up electing more diverse candidates. You know, in New York City, we've actually never had a woman for mayor. We've only had one person of color for mayor. Women only make up 17 out of 51 city council members. Like New York City can be doing better than what it's doing is basically what I'm saying. In other places, they are doing better with ranked choice voting. So in Minneapolis, you know, they elected their first 2 transgender council members in their first year of using ranked choice voting. In 7 of the cities that use ranked choice voting, women make up 50% or more of their local legislatures, like their city councils. And in the 13 largest municipalities that have ranked choice voting, 6 have women mayors, and 4 have Black, Latino, or Asian mayors. So pretty much everywhere has a better track record of New York City that's using ranked choice voting. So I do want to talk about where you can find some additional information, and then I'm happy to answer any and all of the questions that I'm sure you have. All right, first we like to level set expectations. This is like the one thing that COVID was maybe helpful for, because in New York City, we had not had experience with like large scale absentee voting until last June. And we actually had a much longer wait for results than we had ever had before. And that's going to happen again. So a lot of races, we might not know results until 2 to 3 weeks after the election. It takes almost no time at all to actually figure out who won in a ranked choice voting race. Like, this is determined by software that runs very quickly. What takes a long time is for absentee ballots to come in. You know, absentee ballots have to be postmarked by election day, and then the Board of Elections accepts them 7 to 13 days after the election. So they have to wait until all those absentee ballots come in and have been reviewed and are deemed valid before they can even start that tabulation process. So in ranked choice voting races, about half are usually not known on election night because no one's getting to that 50%. But we have had 4 special elections this year with ranked choice voting, and only one of them was known on election night. So I think like we need to temper our expectations of when we are going to know who the winner is. So remember that your ballots are probably going to be more than 1 page. We have seen the ballots, they are looking long. So make sure if you do have more than 1 page in your ballot, and I'm almost certain most of you will, remember to mark and scan both pages. You will likely have races on both sides of the ballot, so make sure to flip over and make sure you're not missing anything. And so fill out both sides, run both sheets through the scanner. Just as a few reminders, I know I've covered this before, but you can rank up to 5 candidates. You don't need to rank up to 5. If you only want to vote for one person, you can still do that. If you only really like 3, you can still do that. I'm not going to lie, in some races, I'm struggling to get to 5, and I need to give it some thought. You know, be sure to only rank 1 candidate in each numbered column. And don't rank the same candidate more than once, no duplicate rankings. If you do, let's say you make a mistake, you can always ask a poll worker for another ballot. That happens all the time. So it's, you know, an error is not fatal, not the end of the day. You can get another ballot. Just important deadlines and reminders. We've already passed the voter registration deadline, but the last day to request your absentee ballot is on June 15th. You can request that. The easiest way is to do it online at nycabsentee.com. You can, if you do get an absentee ballot, the last day to return it is on election day of June 22nd. So that you would need to have your ballot postmarked on election day. We also recommend if you do vote absentee, just go drop it off at a poll site. You can drop it off at an early voting location or at your election day poll site. The Board of Elections has drop boxes in every polling location. And sometimes that's just the easiest way to make sure it's not lost in the mail or anything. As I mentioned at the top, early voting starts this Saturday. It runs through Saturday, June 12th through Sunday, June 20th. Then we get a break that Monday before election day. There's no voting. And then the primary election is on June 22nd. I really love to go to the website, find my poll site.vote.nyc. That's the poll site locator. But it's not just a poll site locator, it also shows you what your sample ballot is going to look like so you can see it in advance. If you would like additional resources, I highly recommend you go to voting.nyc. If you like the voter guide you received in the mail, voting.nyc is sort of the online companion for that guide where you can get additional information. You can watch the video I showed you a couple times. There's tools so you can rank your candidates. And there's just a lot of good stuff over there. You can see all your candidate profiles online. So everything that's in your print guide, you can also see it online. And the candidates, most of them record a video profile that's like a companion to that written profile. That's about 2 minutes. And they just sort of talk about why they want to run for office and why you should vote for them. And I always find that those are interesting to watch. So go check out voting.nyc. You can also catch our video on YouTube, but honestly, it's easier just to go to voting.nyc. And just some things to look out for. You know, you may have been seeing our advertising campaign. We are pretty much everywhere. We're TV, radio, newspapers, bus shelters. You know, that's really advertising the voter guide that's in your mailbox in voting.nyc. We also run the citywide debates program. So if you've been watching any of the mayoral debates, the first one was on New York 1, the second one was on ABC, that's us. The final one is on NBC next Wednesday, I believe. You should have also gotten a postcard mailing from us with ranked choice voting information. We sent that postcard to every registered voter in New York City. And as I mentioned, go check out voting.nyc for the online version of the voter guide you got in the mail. And if you want to contact me, you can certainly reach out to me by email if you have additional questions after tonight. My email address is at the bottom. It's amelillo@nyccfb.info. And this is where I will turn it to Q&A.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was really, really, really informative. So let me see what we have here. No sound. We don't have any questions. Well, I have some questions. All right. Once someone gets 50%, they've won.
If they get 50% of first round votes, then
Right.
they win the election and there's no need to go to the ranked choice voting tabulation.
However, you're going to get absentee ballots. So how will you know that?
So that's the thing. And that's also where I want an expectation set, because I think I like to watch election night coverage, which is maybe unsurprising. I think people who do election night coverage are having a hard time with not knowing the results on election night. We certainly saw that in the presidential election this year. So there's going to be a certain amount of pressure to report something on election night, but we know that a certain number of absentee ballots will not have been collected. So there are going to be these unofficial election night results that will have the first place tallies of people who voted in person, of people who voted early, or of people who voted on election day. That is an incomplete picture of the results because the Board of Elections does have to wait for all absentee ballots to come in. Just as a sense of how many people voted absentee in the presidential election, 1/3 of voters actually used absentee ballots. I do expect it to be a little bit lower this time. I think, the COVID rates are dropping, that more things are reopening. I think people might be more comfortable voting in person than they were in November. But there's still going to be a significant portion of absentee ballots that will need to be collected and counted. So that's what I tell people, like, for election night coverage, take it with a grain of salt. We have to wait for all the votes to come in.
Okay. I don't see any other questions. Are there no other questions in the chat?
I see a couple of people with hands
Oh,
raised.
there's Victoria. Okay, Vic.
Hello. Is the best way to guarantee that a candidate who really sucks does not get to spread his votes around? Is the best way to just not vote for him, to leave it blank?
All right, so I've been thinking about this a lot. So I'll let you in on how I'm thinking about it as a voter. And I'll use the mayor's race as an example. And I won't name names, but there's only one candidate that I really like and feel good about voting for. And the rest, there are a couple I'm like, I'm not sure. And then there's like at least half of them I really can't stand. What I'm doing as a voter is basically ordering, like, in what order would I want these people in City Hall? And I'll rank them like 1 through 8 of just like, who do I want in City Hall most to least? And then I'm going to draw a line after 5 and be like, these are my top 5. Because I think if there's someone you really don't like as a candidate, then you're better off ranking someone who is not that person. Because if you think about it, like, let's say you ranked people, say 1 through 3, who get eliminated from the race, your vote is going to go to your next highest person. So I think it's better to make sure that if there's someone you really don't want there, your vote should be going to someone else that isn't the person you don't really want there. That's a little bit different than what we've been telling people. It's just like the way I am personally thinking as a voter right now, because this whole time we've been like, oh, rank candidates in the order of your preference. And like the first one's your favorite. And then like, think of who you like the next most. I might not like all 5 people, but I am going to rank. I'm going to use all 5 of my rankings.
But doesn't that make the possibility that the one you hate will get a lot of votes? Enough to win?
No.
I mean, wouldn't it be better just to leave him with no votes?
I'll use this as an example. Let's say there are like 3, right now there are kind of like 3 people leading the pack in the mayor's race. And let's say I really, really don't like one of the people. If I really didn't want that person to win, what I could do as a voter is make sure I'm voting for somebody else, even on my top 5 rankings, so that my vote never goes to that person or is always helping a different candidate. It might not turn out the way I want it to, but because of the way the elimination process works, it's better for you to make sure that your vote is always going to someone else to try to like give a different candidate as much support as possible. If there's someone you really can't stand.
Oh, okay. I think I get it. So instead of not voting for the sucky guy, you do vote for somebody who's less sucky so that...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have to do that as a voter all the time, like all the time, even in single choice elections. You're like, like, I don't love this candidate, but I know the person I really like isn't going to win. But if my favorite candidate peels enough votes away, that opens the door for the really sucky candidate to win. So I think I have to vote for the person with more of a chance of winning to prevent that other person from winning.
Okay.
So it's like just a slightly different calculation. And that's why I'm like, all right, I like truly, because I work with City Hall, so I have like a different vested interest in who the mayor is. So I'm like, I need to rank from 1 through 8. Who do I want in City Hall the most? And then 8 is like, who do I want there the least? And I don't know the answer yet. Like, I'm gonna have like a notepad and paper at some point, and I'm gonna need to think about it because I still don't have the right answer. I will come up with the right answer before Saturday when I go vote early. But that is what I would recommend. I mean, the reality is, like, I wish I had a race where I was like, man, I really like 5 people and I just got to pick like in what order they're my favorites. But that's not the reality right now. So I really recommend using all your rankings. Make your vote go as far as possible.
We have another question from Julie. If no one gets 50% on first round, do you go through all successive rounds or only until someone gets to 50%?
I love this question because in other places, they will only go until someone gets to 50%. That's not how we do it in New York City. In New York City, we're going to the final 2 candidates in the race. So it's not whoever gets to 50% first. It's like of the last 2 people standing, who got the most votes. And this is just a way to make sure that whoever wins at the end of that tabulation round, that they have the broadest base of support possible, that as many people have voted for this candidate as possible. So yeah, we go all the way to the end, not just first past the post of 50%.
I'm not sure I understand that, Amanda. So let's say someone got to 50% at the second round, but there were 4 candidates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then what do you do?
So another thing, this gets a little complicated to explain because it's also mathematical. Like at a certain point, if a candidate is getting past 50%, they've already got a majority and they're going to win. And at a certain point, there aren't enough votes to move into another person's column. So, you know, people have looked at this and done the math, and I won't belabor it. But basically, if a candidate is getting majority support, they're going to have majority support at the end. But if we think about a goal of ranked choice voting is to make sure that the winners have the broadest base of support possible, which is not what happens right now, then you want that person's mandate to be even stronger, to be like, this is how many people ultimately voted for this person, as opposed to just cutting off the counting at 50%, which is something that does happen in other places. The people who crafted our ranked choice voting policy just really wanted it to work that way.
And all of this happens in the computer. I mean, you only vote once, right? All the rankings around and everything, that happens in the computer.
Yeah.
Once.
And that takes a matter of minutes, like less than minutes. The tabulation happens very quickly.
Right, because you can't have all those write-in votes, you know, the mail-in votes, you can't have them, well, now you have to send another one in. You only get to send it in
Can I ask
once.
a question? May I ask, I can't do the chat. Could I ask a question?
Sure, this is Joanne.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Two things. I didn't get your complete email address. I missed the end of it. What was your email address?
It's AM.
I know your name.
ILLO
Right.
at NYC CFB.
What is it?
NYC CFB .info.
.info. And also, I just wanted to tell you, I tried to contact New York Votes to get an absentee ballot, and they said that I wasn't, they couldn't find me. So I called, and they kept dropping me when I would put the information in. So I look like I'm not registered, and I'm reading off of my voter card.
Definitely email me about that. So I think you contacted the Board of Elections, it sounds like. Sometimes they're not helpful. There may, I don't know if there would be a problem with your registration, but we could probably troubleshoot that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there
You
any
should all get cards like this, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
If
Did
you
they
got
send
that,
the absentee ballots out already?
they have been sending absentee ballots out already. Yes.
I haven't gotten mine yet.
Yeah, so they've been sending them out on a rolling basis. People have until June 15th to request them.
Okay.
And requesting as early as possible if you know you want to vote absentee. What I will say is, if anyone does happen to have problems with their registration, you can always go vote in person and vote an affidavit ballot. So if you should be registered and for whatever reason there's a problem with your registration, they would check that and make sure you were eligible to vote and sort of like reactivate your registration. The one thing I would say in a primary is if you had to vote an affidavit ballot, make sure you mark your political party on the affidavit ballot envelope. That is a big problem in party primaries.
Do we have any other questions?
Do you know? This is
Go
Julie.
ahead, Julie.
Do you know offhand what approvals it would take in order for this to be implemented, say in presidential primaries?
Yeah, Congress would need to pass it.
And if we wanted to have it statewide, it would be Albany?
Yeah, so for the state, Albany would need to change state law to allow it. I think it's going to take a little while for them to come around to the
Yeah.
idea. They don't love
looking at the city map, I think there's zero chance on federal.
Yeah,
It's basically, we know what the areas were that disapproved of it.
no, I would need to think about what it would take for presidential primaries, because technically the states administer presidential primaries, but the parties set the rules. So I actually haven't thought about, like, could the political parties decide that they want to use ranked choice voting? But then you run into a problem where all these states have never done it before, so they wouldn't know what they're doing. So that's why.
Think about that's Dylan. Think about the 2016 Republican primary with, 15 candidates or whatever they had. That would be a good example.
That's why I always think about presidential primaries, because they're just the best and most visible examples of like a clown car's worth of people standing on a debate stage. And it's like, okay, like my favorite candidate would never win in that sort of pack of people, but ranked choice voting changes that calculation a bit.
Millicent, is that a hand? You have to unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
Yeah, I have nothing to say.
Oh, I thought you had your hand up.
Well, I'm tired.
Oh, okay.
And I can't understand why I'm backwards in the picture, Anyway,
So, Amanda,
I thought it was a terrific, very
Yes.
clear. And I liked the visual. 1, 2, 3, 4, this is how it goes. I mean, I went to one of these once before, and I don't remember why or when. Or, a couple of weeks ago, there was somebody else did this. Couldn't remember, but I wasn't too sure what was really going on. So someone asked me to explain it to them. I wasn't too clear on it. So here I am.
No, it's really, people get hung up on the counting, but what I would say is like hit pause for a minute.
No, that's okay.
Because there's something that's very intuitive. Like my
Okay.
mom and I were having this conversation last weekend, because she doesn't live in New York City, but I talk about this a lot, clearly. And the first time I explained it, she was like, oh, we should use this in presidential elections. I was like, yeah, we should. And then last weekend, she was like, wait, how does the counting work again? My mom was a math teacher for 35 years. And like, I had to re-explain how counting works.
Hold on, sorry.
themselves?
I turn this down. I'm not good with technical things. How the hell I turn this
Can you
off? There it is.
push your mute
There we
button
go.
again?
I should turn it off this. Well, it was my niece.
Mute yourself. Mute yourself.
He's
You-
having a difficult,
There you go.
So that's one way of thinking. It's just like, all right, imagine you sort of line up the candidates and the person with the fewest votes gets eliminated, and the people who voted for that candidate, their vote goes to their next highest candidate. And there is something that is sort of intuitive about that when you think about it that way and just take it out of the counting and the math. Of just like, yep, eliminate the lowest vote getter, that person loses. and then votes keep getting shuffled over. To me, it feels almost like a game of cards or something like that. I can't really explain it. Oh, Karen, it looks like you're on mute. Oh, you're on mute, Karen.
So Jennifer said, thank you very much. It's very helpful. Well, I'd like to say thank you very much on behalf of all of us that this was very helpful. And thank you for giving us those other resources and your particular email address. So if anybody has any further questions, you know where to email. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. Everyone go vote.
We will. If we're on this, we're voting.
Oh, I know.
Yes, we're definitely.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you very much,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Good, Millicent. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Barbara.
Bye-bye.
We should have talked to you about Roundabout Theater at some point.
Okay.
Okay, now I have to stop this. There you go.
Now, how do I get out of here?
Okay, we're good. Bye, Karen.
Bye. Or not, it doesn't want me to leave.
I'm not off.